Welcome to Faint Signals from Vegan. My name's Trisha Roberts. So today I saw once again Ilhan Omar, U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar, being attacked in the media by just dozens and dozens and dozens of people about her comments about the recent attack on Gaza, the open-air prison that is Gaza. And this is what she said on Twitter. She said, "How many more protesters must be shot, rockets must be fired, and little kids must be killed until the endless cycle of violence ends? The status quo of occupation and humanitarian crisis in Gaza is unsustainable. Only real justice can bring about security and lasting peace." Well, a lot of people seem to have ignored the fact that she's mentioned real justice. And you've probably seen the meme that I put up every so often, which I'll show now. Prime Minister Netanyahu thinks that Israel is a Jewish state and that nobody else really matters. So it's an apartheid situation there, and anybody who's been following this issue and watching real independent news would know that this is absolutely devastating for the women, children, and other civilians in Gaza, that they are suffering a terrible humanitarian crisis there due to a blockade, and that they don't have clean water. They have about 4 hours of electricity a day. I could list a long list of things that are being done to them, that in a world which is just, people would be appalled and there would be outcries all over the world. But there's such propaganda about the issues surrounding Palestinians now, and the vilification of them, and calling them all terrorists and so forth, which you can see in the reply section of Ilhan Omar's tweet, that, there's a whole bunch of Hasbro trolls there, people that are trying to keep the narrative about Israel, that it's quote-unquote defending itself, that it's a quote-unquote conflict that's happening, and so forth. This has been going on for decades now, and in Gaza in particular, they are in a desperate and dire way. It's an open-air prison, like I said, and there's a blockade, and it's a continuing genocide. I don't think genocide is too strong a word for what's going on in Gaza, or what's going on for Palestinians in general. But I wanted to share something that Ali ABUNIMAH said. Ali ABUNIMAH is an excellent speaker, and he's from the Electronic Intifada. And I invite you to listen to what he says in the following excerpt from the Electronic Intifada. And then I invite you to check out Avi Martin and Mike Preisner and the Empire Files. There's an upcoming documentary that they have made about this situation in Gaza. It's going to be released at the end of May, and it was filmed by very brave journalists in Gaza every Friday during the Great March of Return at the fence of the open-air prison that is Gaza. They filmed at the risk of their own life, people being executed by Israeli snipers at the fence for protesting unarmed. It was non-violent protests. Of course, there's a lot of smoke because they burn tires so that the snipers can't execute people with clarity. So there's a lot of smoke and tires being burnt. The majority of people, the absolute majority of people, are non-violent, and this is what they do. This is what the Israeli government does to non-violent, unarmed protesters. And there's been 220 plus since 30th of March 2018. 220 plus children, women and men have been executed at the fence of the open-air prison that is Gaza, and literally 5,000 plus, some say even 10,000, have been injured, intentionally so, with live ammunition, and oftentimes they shoot to maim these people, particularly young men. So you see a lot of people with that are amputees because they use ammunition that shatters the whole area that they've shot and makes it impossible to surgically fix. So this is the kind of awfulness that is happening to Palestinians. And I think that this upcoming documentary by the Empire Files, that's the empirefiles.tv, that's coming up in May. There's going to be a premiere at some independent Los Angeles cinema. I'll leave details in the comments section or the information section of this video. So please check that out if you're in Los Angeles. But please, when you see this documentary that the Empire Files have done that's coming up at the end of May, please share that with people, because the more information that's out there that what's really going on for the Palestinians in Gaza, the more that this terrible propaganda about Palestinians and about what's happening to them in this apartheid state will come to an end. The Israelis are losing the propaganda war, and that's why they come down so hard on people like Ilhan Omar, although she said some unfortunate things about American imperialism on Venezuela and the like. But in this case, but she also stands up against it as well. It's a bit of a confusing mix sometimes from her, but on the whole, she's pretty good. She did say something which was, I think, not very well thought out, and that was that there needs to be a two-state solution for Palestinians. That is not possible because there's been so much illegal settlements going on in the occupied territory. If you search online, you can see how many villages and homes are just illegally demolished. They had Palestinian families living in them, and they throw tear gas in the houses and drag them out, and then they demolish their homes. And whole villages have been demolished, and ancient olive groves have been ripped up, and then the Israeli government then helps the illegal Jewish settlers to then build on top of demolished villages and demolished homes of Palestinians, and the Palestinians have nowhere to go. That's what's going on every single day. That's what happened to Rachel Corrie, an American citizen who went to stand up against the illegal settlements, and she stood in the way of a Israeli bulldozer, and they just went right over the top of her and killed her. Look into that, Rachel Corrie. That happened in 2003. So this illegal settlement, which is against many, many UN resolutions, the UN has no teeth, so it just goes on unabated. The whole idea of a two-state solution is dead. There is no possibility of that. What needs to happen is a one-state where Palestinians and Israelis live side by side with equal rights. That is the only solution. That is the solution at this point. So we need to support not a two-state solution, because that is impossible now. It's been so atomized for Palestinians, the land, etc., that it's not possible to have a two-state solution anymore. There's hardly any land left for them. And the one-state solution is really what people should be going for. And the way to help that is to join the BDS campaign, Boycott, Divestments and Sanctions campaign, that help end the apartheid situation in South Africa. I was around and participated in that campaign for the end of apartheid in South Africa, and it worked very well. Celebrities stopped attending various events in Israel. They stopped going to, I'm talking about South Africa now, they stopped going to Sun City in South Africa, and the whole thing basically helped bring an end to that situation. For Palestinians, this situation is much worse than at the height of apartheid in South Africa, and that's why it's so important that we do whatever we can in non-violent ways to support Palestinians and to help air this issue, because there is so much propaganda with the mainstream media. And just remember that U.S. Congress receives money from AIPAC, which is the Israel lobby, and a lot of their decisions are based on their lobbyist money. A lot of the Congress's decisions are based on Israel lobbyist money, and so a lot of foreign policy decisions are based on the Israel lobby's influence. So, and the mainstream media just go along with that as well. And if you want to find out about the Israel lobby, watch the documentary, The Lobby at the Electronic Intifada. I'll leave a link to that. We have the same sort of thing going on in Australia where, if you criticize the policies of Israel towards Palestinians, you get pretty much shamed. And in one case, one politician who was running in this current election in Australia in May, she was sort of driven out because she made some truthful statements about what's happening to Palestinians. So the Israel lobby is in the UK, and it's basically sort of keeps this Hasbara, which is just the Israel narrative. It keeps that going. So, and it calls anybody who criticizes the apartheid state of Israel, it calls them anti-Semitic. That's the smear that goes with criticizing apartheid policies that Israel obviously has, and how the Palestinians are treated as absolute second-class citizens, and they feel within their rights to just execute them at the fence of the open-air prison that is Gaza, or in the West Bank and so forth, in other occupied territories. So, we have to push against this Hasbara narrative that is very, very prominent online, on social media and so forth. And you can see it underneath Ilhan Omar's tweet, how prominent these Hasbara trolls. And literally, there are students in Israel who receive free hot air balloon rides from the government if they go around to sites like Ilhan Omar's tweet and tweet out a whole bunch of supportive comments about what Israel is doing to Palestinians. There's literally paid people lots of them who go around trolling any discussion about this issue all over social media. So anyway, I'm going to leave a link to Ilhan Omar's tweet because I invite people to go to her tweet and support her position about this terrible injustice and terrible killings of people that are based, 2 million people plus, who are in this basically area that they cannot get out of, and they're being bombed in that area. And in 2014, 550 children were killed in bombings in this so-called protective edge that Israel had happening in mid-2014, and over 1,000 adults were killed, Palestinians. They were just bombing indiscriminately in Gaza. There were so many children killed that they had to start putting them in the freezer sections of shops because the morgue was filled. So this was started to become in some ways the unraveling of the Israeli narrative that they're defending themselves, because it was very clear that this was just a mass murder. And what is very clear also is that it's a mass murder at the fence of the open-air prison that is Gaza, when all these unarmed Palestinians, thousands of them, go down every Friday to the Great March of Return and are executed at the fence. And you will see that very clearly when you watch this documentary by the Empire Files about what's happening in Gaza. And also I invite you to watch Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen's documentary called Killing Gaza, and you can find that actually if you search through my videos on Faint Signals and Vega, I did an interview with Max Blumenthal and Dan Cohen about that documentary they did, Killing Gaza. It's a really amazing documentary. I invite you to check that out as well. So I'll see if I can find the link to that and put that in the information section, the accounts of this particular video. I'll now share this interview with Ali ABUNIMAH from the Electronic Intifada just recently about these recent bombings in Gaza, the recent attack, and the There's been, I think, 27 Palestinians now have been bombed and killed, including I think a 15-month-old baby. They had, I won't show you the image of this little baby, but you can find photos of this little child online. That child and their mother the child was killed, the mother was injured, and there was another child also injured, I think. But basically 27 so far have been killed. And if you look in the replies section of some of these, like the IDF, if you go and look at on Twitter, the Israeli Defense Forces, they're actually occupational forces, but they call themselves Defense Forces. You look at the horrific comments that people make, probably mostly Hasbro trolls, but that people make in the reply section when the IDF talk about killing Palestinians. They cheer them on, and literally you can actually see Israelis get together overlooking some of the carnage. They'll be like, it's like a little outdoor party. They all sit there and sort of cheer on any sort of rockets going into Gaza. And remember that the U.S. gives Israel $10.5 million every day of military support so that they can carry out these kinds of attacks and what the Israeli government calls mowing the lawn, in quotes. That's what they call this kind of thing, mowing the lawn, in relation to bombing Gaza. That's literally what they call it. And you can even see IDF T-shirts where it will have a picture of a Palestinian pregnant woman, and it'll have a crosshairs on her, and it will say basically something like 2 for 1, getting 2 for 1. And sadly, you know, these recent elections in Israel, they've re-elected Netanyahu, who is extremely right-wing and extremely genocidal towards Palestinians. And they've re-elected him, which tells you that there is a certain majority in Israel who are quite fine. There are people in Israel that are totally against this, but there are a lot of people who are totally for and openly call for a genocide of Palestinians. Openly call for a genocide of Palestinians. So that's really frightening, and that's why there needs to be pressure from outside, because change cannot come from within at this point. Change cannot come from within Israel at this point. It needs external pressure, and that's why things like the BDS, boycott, divestments and sanctions, #BDS, is so important. And that's what helped bring an end to the apartheid situation in South Africa. So that's something to consider. So anyway, I will play this by Ali ABUNIMAH, who I think is an excellent speaker, but you can find out so much if you check out Democracy Now! Not that I'm endorsing Democracy Now! Because they tend to have promotions of regime change, sometimes towards Syria and stuff, but as far as the Palestinian issue goes, they actually do very good reports on that. Check out the Real News Network, they have some good reports, but one of the best programs really is the Empire Files. I know I go on about the Empire Files often, but that's because it's such a great program. It's not because I have a particular thing about that program, it's just that it's excellent. So they have 7 programs on the Empire Files about this issue of Gaza and Palestinians in general in this apartheid state, etc. They're really excellent, and of course there'll be a number 8 now with this upcoming documentary on Gaza. So thanks so much for watching. Please click the like button if you like the content. Please hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell. Otherwise you don't receive updates when there's new videos drop. And please leave comments. I always enjoy your comments, and I thank you so much for your support. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Trisha Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time. Bye for now.
We've got Ali ABUNIMAH with us now, co-founder of Electronic Intifada, an independent news publication which focuses on Palestine. He's on Skype from Chicago today. Nice to see you, Ali.
It's only inevitable because Israel chooses to make it inevitable. The Israeli government thinks it's a fantastic idea to keep more than 2 million people, half of them children, living in a caged ghetto, cut off from the outside world, with very little ability to travel even for medical care, to cut off trade to them, to destroy their industry, to destroy their agriculture, to destroy the means of civilized life, and to murder them with snipers if they even protest peacefully against this at the ghetto fence. As long as Israel thinks that's a really great way to treat 2 million people in the Gaza Strip, then this will keep happening, because people in Gaza have to get the message out that they are human and that Israel cannot continue to terrorize and besiege and kill them in this way, and have a lovely Eurovision Song Contest where it falsely presents itself to the world as this lovely, peaceful holiday destination, which is just being terrorized by these awful people in the Gaza Strip. That's the script. That's the reality Israel has imposed.
It's extraordinary that we're even talking about a Eurovision Song Contest in the midst of all of this, but there is a suggestion that that is a factor at least now. Plus, you've got the 71st anniversary celebrations for Israel. The fact that it will possibly try to keep a lid on this sort of thing just because of that outward-facing image.
Well, Israel can keep a lid on it by lifting the siege of Gaza, letting the people there live, letting them breathe, letting in medicines. Half of the medicines in Gaza are at zero stock, according to the United Nations. The number of medical permits Israel gives for cancer patients and others to leave Gaza for life-saving medical treatment is at its lowest point ever. People in Gaza are in a ghetto. This siege is violence. It's constant violence. It kills people. It kills their lives. And this is what people in Gaza are trying to end the siege so that they can live. If they protest at the border fence, Israel murders them with snipers. They high-power rifles to kill children, to kill medics, to kill journalists, to kill women. And if they resist using rockets, they're called terrorists. My question is, what are people in Gaza supposed to do if the whole so-called international community is doing nothing while Israel subjects them to these inhumane conditions?
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you about.
Of course they'll resist.
This is what I wanted to ask you about, because everything you've just described for the people of Gaza sadly is unlikely to change unless there is some sort of intervention. Now, much is said about a potential US plan led by Jared Kushner, but I mean, the likelihood of that succeeding or changing anything for the Palestinians?
No, of course, the American so-called deal of the century is just utter nonsense. But in the short term, in terms of relieving the suffering Israel is inflicting on 2 million people in Gaza, half of them children, is the urgent matter. And Israel will continue to act in this way, in this barbaric way of subjecting the entire population to collective punishment, to bombing, because people are protesting at the border fence, because 2 Israeli soldiers were injured, and then subjecting the entire population to collective punishment. Israel behaves in this way because the so-called international community allows it. The European Union allows it. The Arab Gulf regimes are busy normalizing relations with Israel and telling them, you know, the Saudis, the Bahrainis, the Omanis, the United Arab Emirates, and even to a certain extent, it has to be said, Qatar, are normalizing with Israel and saying to Israel, we don't mind what you do to the Palestinians. You're welcome at Dubai Expo 2020. You're welcome to send your athletes to compete in Doha or in Bahrain. As long as the message going out from the so-called international community to Israel is you can do what you please to the Palestinians, Israel has no reason to stop. There has to be a price. Israel has to be held accountable, and if governments and the UN won't do it, the world has to do it through boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. And it is a shame on so-called civilized Europe that they are allowing this apartheid regime that is doing this to Gaza to host the Eurovision Song Contest. And that's why so many ordinary European citizens are calling for a boycott of Eurovision. It's the governments, the complicit governments, that are giving Israel the gift of Eurovision to whitewash its blood-soaked image.
Ali ABUNIMAH is from Electronic Intifada. We thank you for your time.
Thank you.